Into the Fire, The Lost Daughter is a Netflix documentary that literally had me screaming at the TV, had me crying on the sofa, you name it. And there are so many similarities to the current case of Madeline Soto that we've been following. It's mind-boggling, and we're going to talk about it in today's video. Y'all, it is officially fall. We are in my jam, my time of the year. I absolutely love everything fall related. I love time in the woods, the smells, the change of the leaves, and I also love the scent that Drift sent me that everybody that gets in my car is dying over this month. If you remember from earlier in the month, I got this right here, the stone little clip, y'all. It's amazing, and y'all, it still smells so amazing. Oh my God, I absolutely love it. Now, again, it's the Apple Orchard. And y'all, literally fall in your car wherever you do it. I do this with these things now. Now, I've collected so many of them, I'm not gonna lie. So what I used to do when I just had one, I get to work and take it into work with me. And people would literally be like, what is that smell? It's amazing. Y'all, this stuff lasts forever. And here's the other thing. It is absolutely super affordable. The products range from like $9 to $15, and then with the code, you're gonna get 55% off your first month. Y'all, so we had to revisit because let me tell you what, anytime somebody gets in my car, and I have to tell them, I'm like, look, I'm not trying to like sell you or make money on this, but this is my code, this is the thing you're talking about, this is the scent, and yes, you can get a discount, and yes, it's absolutely next to nothing. I literally end up like not selling, but you know what I'm saying, hooking somebody up with a code anytime they get in my car because they are like, what is that smell? And then with this one, the new Apple, the scent that we've been doing for this month, and the stone thing, y'all, it is so cool. I mean, literally, even people at work are like, what is that fancy thing on the thing? I'm like, it's Drift. Okay. It's Drift. Thank you. It's fancy, it's Drift. So Drift is a super affordable subscription. So first they give you in your opening package or whatever, you get that clip, the scent, and then you get monthly refills where you can try the new scents. They only use premium essential and fragrance oil blends. It doesn't have all that harmful chemicals that traditional fragrance companies use. They use sustainably resources and essential oils, vegan, cruelty-free, and pet-friendly. Yeah. So scan the QR code or use my code from Sofa. Y'all, it's gonna get you 55% off your first month at Drift. Hello, Sofa Squad, and welcome back to the sofa. The sofa's back there, and the little boys, Bo and Luke, are in my hands, and my name is Paul. Now, if you are new to the channel, welcome, glad you're here. Brush off one of the pillows and make us eat. But if you're not new, well, I'm glad you're here too. So, and if you haven't been following me, then you'll know we got two little mascots. I am trying to hold them because it's early morning, and if I'm not holding them, they're barking and playing, so it's making recording a little bit tricky. So we're gonna see how this goes because it's been massive playtime this morning, and they might either be ready to fall asleep in my hands, or they're gonna be like, it's sorry, Dad, we ain't doing it, okay? But what we are here for today is to discuss a new Netflix documentary. Now, this is called Into the Fire, The Lost Daughter. This is 2024, filming this in September 2024. So I just want to say this. This is going to be, if you follow me, then you'll know how I do these, but major spoiler alerts. Now also that comes with a, and I hate to use the word, a caveat. I hate saying spoiler alert on a true, like a documentary like with this because it's people's lives, it's real victims, it's not, you know, like my movie review channel. But the reason I do say spoiler alert is because, you know, this is one of those things where you're watching it, and as I did, my mouth hit the floor the way the story was told. So I do this from the perspective assuming you've not heard of this case, you've not followed this case, you're literally going to go into it watching this. So this is almost like a companion thing. So that's the only reason why I say like spoiler alerts. I don't want to reduce the fact that there's real people involved in this into like a movie plot, if you will. But one of the big things that this did, if you want to look at it from like a storytelling point of view, because I do have a background in that, I studied creative writing, I'm a fiction short story writer. I love doing that. The way the story is told in this is top notch, okay? They absolutely beautifully illustrated the people involved, the victims, the advocates, the bio mom, it was amazing, okay? And again, jaw-dropping moments. So just know that if going into this, you're going to be hearing everything about it. So if you're wanting it to be brand new, then don't be watching this, okay? We will do a live chat to discuss it after this, whenever this goes up, because I'm dying to hear what y'all have to say about it. So what I'm going to do, and the way I do this, is I literally watch it and just make notes as we go. So just think about, if you're watching a documentary, how they kind of jump from person to person and thing to thing. Just know that that's kind of what I'm doing here, and I use these as talking points, and that's what we'll do. And then we'll kind of round it out at the end, and then we'll meet in the comment section and again on the other channel for the live chat and talk about it. So let's get into some particulars about the case and who we're dealing with. So in 2010, Kathy Turkanian discovered that the child she placed for adoption went missing 21 years earlier. That's like the tagline that Netflix, says or whatever. Okay, so let's get a few things out of the way, because there's going to be some name stuff that goes on here that could be confusing and whatnot. So Alexis is the victim. Alexis is the birth name that was given to said victim. When she was adopted, her name would be changed to Andrea Bowman. So just know that once we get into start talking about when the bio mom comes in and she starts talking and that Alexis is who she refers to her as, because obviously that's who she would know her as, right? Now, the adopted parents, their names are Brenda and Dennis Bowman. Okay, so those are the adopted parents. Now, we meet Kathy Turkanian. This is the bio mom, okay? So Kathy, bio mom, Brenda, Dennis, adopted parents. See, I'm confused myself now. Alexis, Andrea, victim, young lady in the case, the child, okay? So there's that. Let's get going. So we meet the bio mom in the very beginning, and she's talking about when she's met her husband, and essentially you're being introduced into the story. Now, she says that after a month of marriage, she tells him about a daughter that she had and whom she had to put up for adoption. Now, she says she was only 16 years old. It was 1974. So if this is one of those things, if you know kind of a thing, back then, now granted it had changed a little bit, but a very young lady, kid having a kid, this was not good, right? Regardless, she says that what happened is that her mother basically convinced her, you can't raise this child. You're not good. You're not a good person. You're not a good mother. You can't do this. You need to put this child up for adoption, and that's just what needs to happen. And so she let her mother convince her to put said baby up for adoption. I think she was 10 months old when she was officially adopted or whatever. So we're talking less than a year old, right? Now, again, I didn't say this in the very beginning, but I'm reading from my notes on the computer here, so that's why I'm looking down. So don't think I'm being rude or anything, okay? So she puts her up for adoption. Now, it ends up being a closed adoption, which means, done. You're never gonna you're not going to know who these people are. They're not going to know who you are. Now, obviously, if you're familiar with adoption, stuff like that, kids are kids, people are people, humans are humans, right? A lot of times you're going to grow up and be like, where did I come from? Who are my people? So that will come into play later, or kind of soon, when she hears from the adoption agency, but it's for all the wrong reasons, right? Let's keep going. So on that note, 35 years goes by, right? She gets this letter from the adoption agency, and they're basically like, hey, look, you know what, we have an issue. Now, when she got this, she was like, oh, it's probably my daughter, Alexis, wanting to find me, wanting to know who I am. I knew this day would come, but she opens the letter and reads it, and that's not it. I just got goosebumps, y'all. This might be, we might need one of the paper plates to fan ourselves with, because this is a tearjerker. This whole story, y'all, it gets to me. So, but it's not that, right? What it is they're like, look, you know, your daughter went missing at the age of 14 in 1989. She's been missing, and we actually have like a Jane Doe body, an unidentified body, and we need your DNA to help identify the body. Now, I mean, it's already starting to happen, y'all. Oh my gosh. Okay, so the flood of thoughts and emotion that come to my mind with that right there. Imagine you put your child up for adoption, you have to go through that, the trauma, all this type of stuff. You get the letter, oh my gosh, you know, they're wanting to find me, blah, 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 blah. And then it's, she's missing. She's what? I cannot imagine the questions, the what ifs, all of the things that would flood through my mind, right? So this is going on. So what she does, they want her DNA, and she doesn't want to wait around. She like does this, but she's like, what's going on? Now remember, she legally has no rights to information or anything, and this is where I'm like, oh my god, but I mean, it's the way the system is set up, right? So they're not going to really tell her anything. So she's sitting here like, I don't want to wait around to figure out who this person is. So she gets on the internet. She starts like, I'm going to figure this out on my own and see where is my daughter. So she goes to a missing persons website. She types in June 23rd, 1974. That's her daughter's birthday, to a missing persons place. Plugs it in, and sure enough, a woman comes up. And this woman is Andrea Michelle Bowman. Now, this is, again, like I told you, this is Alexis is now, that's her name, right? So she sees this. She lived in Hamilton, Michigan. She went missing from there in March 1989. She can't find any information on the adoptive parents, nothing, right? So she's like, okay, what's going on? So she's like, you know what? I'm going to make a Facebook page. I'll put a page out there. It's going to be, about, my daughter. We'll do it by her new name and all that. And literally tips start pouring in, because obviously people knew this girl, right? They were like, oh, I went to school with her. I did this. I did that. I remember this. It was the last time. I mean, it was uncanny. And again, as you're watching this, there's two stories unfolding in this, right? There's the mystery. Well, there's multiple ones actually. There's the mystery of what happened to her, number one, like the victim, like on that level, like the true crime aspect, if you will. But then you're also seeing the journey of a woman discovering a lifetime of a person they brought into the world that they never had the chance to know. And so that would be like, even in a normal circumstance of like regular adoption, this type of situation where it's like you meet up with your child or, whatever, decades later, and it's like, oh, what, here's this human. None of that happens with this. So the human layers to this, the layers of emotion and things of that nature are just so thick in this docuseries, which is one of the documentary, which is one reason what drew me to it. So eventually a relative of Andrea's reaches out, and I think it's like her aunt or something like that. So like the vibes that I was getting is like the fun aunt, the cool aunt, that kind of thing. And she will play a part in this documentary. We'll hear from her. She's in it, right? So she reaches out, and then this is how Kathy learns that, oh, okay, my daughter, Alexis, was adopted by Brenda and Dennis Bowman. So there's all these connections. And the aunt will say, she was very loved by us. We absolutely loved her. Now that's twofold. Keep that in mind when I say the aunt said by us, okay? Because it will be quite the different story when we see what was going on with Brenda and Dennis. Okay. And on that note, the narrative switches to learning about Brenda and Dennis. It's going to refer to my notes here. So we hear about them meeting and marrying, and they have complications. Like, we basically learn their story, like, why did they adopt, right? And essentially they could not get pregnant, tried. So eventually they go for adoption, they apply for it and all this. Now, again, if you're familiar with adoption and whatnot, you know how insanely difficult it can be, especially to get a baby, okay? Like, very, very tricky. So they do all the things, and then one day they get a phone call, we've got a baby for you, and 10 months old, and they're like, she was sweet. The family considered her a gift from God. And then Brenda and Dennis eventually moved from Norfolk over to Michigan, okay? Now, Norfolk, remember Norfolk, because it will play a huge role in this story. So they moved to Michigan. They're doing their thing, just kind of doing life and whatnot. Years go by, a life happens, right? Then Brenda starts getting sick, and it doesn't go away, and it doesn't go away, and it doesn't go away. And so her husband, Dennis, is like, basically like brings the pregnancy home. He's like, you just need to take this and see, because this is something that's like sus, as the kids would say, right? Well, she was pregnant. And I was like, oh my God. So she's pregnant, and Vanessa, another little girl, will soon come. So 1989, Andrea, the adopted daughter, Alexis, real name, she's in high school. Now she's going to have a little baby sister, this is, way younger, right? Obviously. So the narrative of the documentary will then switch to people who knew Alexis, Andrea. I'm going to kind of go back and forth calling her that, obviously, so I apologize, because at this point I feel like Alexis is probably the more appropriate name, but if you've seen this, you might be like, what are you talking about? You know what I mean? If you've seen it or whatever, so I'll kind of go back and forth and maybe do both of them at the same time. But, so we hear from our old girlfriends, and of course, as usual, you hear, she's this awesome person, has this amazing smile, she was outgoing, funny, really wanted to make others happy. That was a big thing that it seemed to be that her friend said. Like, she was just that type person. Now, Dennis says that when she turned around 12, and you'll hear from like different segments and like old interviews and like phone calls and stuff like that. And the way the series does this, I keep saying series, the documentary does this, is you don't know where those were coming from in the very beginning. Let's just say that, okay? So you hear Dennis at various things, like audio of him talking, and it's like, okay, when she turned 12, it was like a light switch turn, right? She starts skipping school, she's run away from home, she's doing drugs, she's doing this, she's doing that. And, watching it, I was like, okay, you know what? She's had a life, right? She was adopted. Whatever's going on with that at that point, we don't know in her mind, right? Nobody ever will at this point. Now her, adopted parents have a biological daughter. So, you know what I mean? It's like, and then just being 12, 13, I mean, that's a terrible time in life, okay? It's just when you're figuring out that, oh, wait, I'm a human, you know what I'm saying? Like, you just feel like, ugh, it's just a kind of, a weird time in life. So all this is going on, okay? But we'll also find out, so much more was going on, that it's like, if the least she was doing was run away and doing some drugs, anybody would in her situation, okay? So, but we don't know that right away going into it. The last day, he was like, Andrea was quiet, Dennis and Brenda, so Dennis had a job. Dennis takes Brenda and the baby, remember they got Vanessa, drops her off at work, comes back home with said baby. So he goes in and he was basically like, Andrea was gone. They had cash missing. He calls the cops. He reports it. And he's like, my daughter, she's gone. She's run away. Now, again, leading up to this has kind of been going on, right? So this is probably, at this point, it's an emergency, but not like, oh my God. Like, it's probably, the vibe that I was getting is it's like, here we go. What is it today? Okay, but of course time will tell. It was way more than that. Now we'll also hear from the prosecuting attorney, and they'll speak and they'll say, talk about, just like we see, to circle back, just like in the Madeline Soto case, all these searches, all this stuff going on, all this. But unlike with the Madeline Soto case, this case quickly goes cold. Okay, like she's like, there's ain't nothing, right? No leads, no nothing. And the case goes cold. And that's just kind of what happens. So then the narrative switches back to the biomom. And the biomom herself talks about her own struggles during youth, abuse, all this kind of stuff, and how she would run away to get away from the abuse. And she's like, you know what? I know how authorities view runaways. Like, they're very quickly dismissed. It's like, they ran away, they would have been, whatever, you know what I'm saying? So this concerns her. So now remember, she's taken it into her own hands to do this research and, find her daughter. So she gets hooked up with a web sleuth. He gets involved in the case. His name's Carl. Hats off to Carl, right? Does amazing work here. So he got involved. So we meet Carl, and he says he got involved on the website Web Sleuths. So Carl ends up putting together like this data sheet or whatever you want to call it, of, it's almost like, here's this person, they're missing from here in this time, so you can go through and enter data in it, okay? So he's talking about this Jane Doe case from Wisconsin. He plugs some numbers into his data sheet, and a bunch of stuff comes up, right? Like several people or whatever. Well, on that list, Andrea is one of the cases that it spits out. And he notices where Andrea and Jane Doe look super, super familiar, or, alike or whatever. So then Catherine goes back to the DNA. So we go back to the biomom. Should we circle back to that? So we talk to Catherine, the DNA. Remember at the very beginning where they're like, hey, we want to do your DNA to see if it matches this Jane Doe, it might be your daughter, whatever. Well, they do that, and it's not. She's not related to this person, so they're a ground zero with that. It's not her daughter, which on one hand would be like, okay, maybe there's hope, maybe there's this, right? So then the narrative switches over to Chris. This is an investigator who is actually in school with Andrea, and he takes over the case eventually. He wants to solve it. Something never set right. Okay, like it just was like, this isn't set right. Okay, so he takes over. So we meet another person. Her name's Meta. And she reaches out to Catherine, and she's telling her own story about being abducted. And, you know, she's like, it feels like it's just so similar to might have what have happened to Andrea. So I'm going to refer to my notes for this part here to read the notes off about her own story. So she said that she was kidnapped at age 6, and she said that the man took her into the woods, essayed her, but he was interrupted and he ran. They never caught the guy, but basically she's been like looking for him ever since. When the internet came along, we already know, right? And so she kept researching her area for similar cases and eventually comes across Alexis as Andrea's. So she's going through this, and then this gives me goosebumps, y'all. As she's looking and learning about Alexis/Andrea, she sees pictures of her adopted parents. And when she sees a picture of Dennis, she's like, that's the guy who kidnapped me. She's like, oh my God, like this looks exactly like him. Y'all, the hair is standing up all over me. Literally, y'all. This was one of the moments that I was talking about at the beginning, that your mouth hits the ground, okay, where you're like, or your jaw, whatever, you know what I'm saying? You're like, oh my God, okay? So this is where his name, Dennis, gets plugged into the scenario, right? People start researching him and all this type of stuff. So Meta says that when she heard Dennis's voice, chills went down her spine. She was like, it was him. Okay, that comfort, it was him. Okay, so change courses here, okay? Catherine, Biomom, Carl, Web Sleuth. We're just naming things off here, right? Sue, and they all get together, they're talking and whatnot, okay? So Sue's like, yeah, they would come over to the house, and Brenda would be like, let me tell you what the kid did. And Sue's like, you mean your daughter? Like, why are you calling her that? What is she, like a goat? You know what I'm saying? Like, it just seems so off, like the vibe of it or whatever, and it does sound like that. Now I've heard it kind of depends on, maybe, I don't know if it's a regional thing. I've heard some people like, well, guess what the kid did today? But it sounds like the way Brenda was doing it was more like, you know what I'm saying, like you have to be there to get the nuance and the vibe of how someone says something and what they do, and this sounded like not like a regular joke around, like, guess what the little kid did today type thing. So then we'll start meeting a couple of people from Alexis/Andrea's childhood. And one of them was like, we went over to her house one day, and she's like, hey, wait outside, don't go in there. And it was kind of odd. And she's like, but when Andrea went in there, like, Dennis started chasing her down, like I could see through the thing, right? And she's like, it was so crazy. And she was like, I ended up just kind of leaving because I was like, what's up with this, okay? Then another story was at dinner, the parents were eating hamburgers, and Andrea and this friend were eating, like, basically what they call like a ketchup sandwich, okay? And Andrea said that was all that she was allowed to eat. Now this is like at the dinner table or whatever. Well, this absolutely set Dennis off. I mean, he comes up over the table, he hits her in front of her friend, and the friend's like, you can imagine, right? And the friend was like, Brenda didn't do anything. She just sat there like nothing happened. So as you're hearing these stories in the documentary, whatever, and imagine the people who knew her and this played out in real time, like, her friends, her family, you can start connecting these dots. It's not good. So how earlier I talked about there's recordings and things of that nature. So we hear one that's basically Brenda talking about Alexa/Andrea saying that Dennis was doing things to her, essaying that type of stuff, and that she was telling her, no, you're lying, basically. There's a level of denial that goes on in this. We'll talk about it at the end, okay? So Alexis/Andrea, she didn't really want to leave because she didn't want to leave Vanessa there, okay? God rest her soul for that, because she knew, okay? Obviously because she lived through it, okay? So, there's that. So a family said that Brenda said nothing was taken or gone when Alexis/Andrea left, and that she couldn't talk to Dennis about it because they would start fighting. Now, what this is in relation to is putting the pieces together. Remember, Dennis is like, oh, I came home, she was gone, money was missing, this was gone, like her bag or something like that or whatever, her jacket and whatnot, she was gone. Well, Brenda's like, well, this wasn't gone. But then anytime I bring this up, like, Dennis melts down. Red flag number 352 with this man, okay? So then there's another incident, and court records are read where a dude makes a girl go into the woods. He takes a shot at her. She gets away. They catch him. He pleads down. The judge said he is a danger to women if he is not confined. Keep that in mind, that whole situation, okay? Brenda talks about taking Andrea to visit him at prison. This is just the notes I read. So what they mean is this. That whole situation I just said, it was Dennis. That was Dennis, okay? Brenda is taking Alexis/Andrea to prison to visit him, talking about what that was like and whatnot. The significance of this is multi-layered and multifaceted, okay? First of all, we've got a conviction, okay? This man is willing to take shots at a child, at a little girl in the woods, not trying to do horrible things to her. Thank God, it panned out the way it did, and she was able to get away and be saved, right? The fact also, Brenda knew this, okay? So here you go, documented evidence, conviction. I'm taking Alexis/Andrea to the prison to visit him. So this is where when we start talking about the denial, that's a component of this that you're watching, and it's so hard to understand. But then when you hear some phone calls between Brenda and Dennis, you can see how this man probably manipulated this woman, and I'm not trying to alleviate her accountability in this, okay? At all, right? But you can see how this man found one with Brenda, and he worked on her for his lifetime, okay? But we'll get to that in a minute. Let's continue. Okay, so then the narrative switches back over to Biomom. She goes to this missing persons conference in Michigan. Both her and the adoptive mother, Brenda, are at this conference, okay? Now remember, there's a timeline in this, so this is before we find out the fate of everything and whatnot, right? So Brenda and her are there. Brenda tells the group this, basically that, hey, we're all here or whatever. And Kathy calls her out, throws her coffee on her, and is basically like, you need to tell the real story. Now, Carl is also there, right? Remember the web sleuth guy? And he's like, here's the real story. And he starts going into all this research he's done on Brenda and Dennis, right? You can only imagine the group is like, what? Okay. Well, Brenda's basically like, they're ridiculous. It's a good thing my husband isn't here. And Brenda says that she's forgiven her husband. Now, this is at that, point in time, right? Okay. So then here's some other stuff. The Bowmans moved to a new house soon after Alexis/Andrea goes missing. They move to a new house. Now keep that in mind because this is going to be very relevant later on, okay? So then Carl and Kathy, they are looking for, obviously, clues and whatnot. And they're honing in, on the house and whatnot. And Kathy's basically like, my girl, this gives me goosebumps. It kind of makes me want to cry. I'm not going to lie. She's like, my girl is buried in their backyard, okay? She just has this hunch. She has this thing. Well, also what's going on is for the drone, and Kathy's like, look, I'm talking, they're going over property records and stuff like that. You know how you get the visuals of Google Maps and stuff. There's an area in the backyard that has constantly changed over the years. And she's like, that's where my baby girl's at. Keep that in mind. So, okay, so then we switch over. There's all this police activity one day over at the Bowman's house, right? They've got Dennis in the back car, and he's back there talking about I don't know what I'm back here for. I didn't kill my daughter. Blah, 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 blah. And then it switches over to some interviews, he's in custody. They're interviewing him and whatnot. And the cop's kind of walking him through this. I'm the one you've been looking over your shoulder with. And you're watching the documentary and you're thinking, they got him, whatever. Well, then he says, we're here to arrest you for this 1980 case, a fighter pilot's wife, this whole other thing. And you're like, what? Okay, you're like, how, what? This is a jaw drop thud in this again, okay, where you're just like, but again, take everything aside from it, and the way the director, whoever worked on this documentary, told the story is amazing, right? For moments like this where you're like, WTF, what has this guy not done, okay? They interview Brenda, okay? Now, Kathleen was the victim's name in this case. 25 years old. Her family members speak about her again. Very outstanding human being. They always are, right? It's like, I don't know how these people, like, well, I don't want to say, people who take other people's lives always take people that had so much to give and offer to those around them, even just simply their spirit. You know what I'm saying? It's so frustrating and so heartbreaking. So they talked to a friend who hung out with her like the night before, whatever. She's like, you know what, we were hanging out, we were drinking wine, whatever. I go back the next day to see her, and she's like, you know, the door's kind of open, this is weird, wine glasses are still out. And she eventually finds Kathleen in her bedroom, obviously deceased, okay? Now, Brenda, remember how I said they talked to Brenda? Total denial, okay? She's like, that wasn't Dennis, you've got the wrong guy. Like, what are you talking about, huh? This isn't, you know. And this is what I'm talking about with the denial and all that kind of stuff in this case, where you're just like, whoa, mama Gemma, okay, this one is, hey, did said the cat and the fiddle. I don't know what to do, okay? It's very frustrating. So they will sit there and they will use DNA to narrow down who the offender was. Familial DNA, all that type of stuff. They get down to like 31 potential family suspects, that type thing. Dennis is on this list. So the detective is like going through, well, you already know when they pull his name up, they're like, they see that one conviction. His name's all over the place with his adopted daughter situation, right? Of like, we think he might have done this. Again, this is if it quacks like a duck, if it walks like a duck, most likely it's a duck, okay? And so that's what's going on here. So, you know, the detective that's doing this, he goes to a cold case conference and he meets another detective from Michigan who is like, oh yeah, I know Dennis, right? And he's like, I would almost 100% tell you that's the man you're looking for. So these two worlds collide, okay? And it's just, again, when you watch, it gives me goosebumps. When you're watching these cases that we do and you see how, whether you're religious, whether you're not religious, where you believe in coincidences or whatever, these moments like this, whether you want to call them God moments or I don't know what, okay? But where it's like, it's just whatever makes the world go around lines up for these moments of people to intersect, or like the chances of a victim something and them speaking from the grave to bring the person that did this to justice, right? In this case, it has so many of those in it, okay? And this is one of those moments. So there's that. Now, this whole situation is here. So remember, this Michigan over here, they got to prove that he was even in Norfolk back in 1980 to have taken this woman's life, right? That's the first thing. So they are able to do that. They're like, hey, we can prove he was there, okay? And now we need the DNA sample. So they call the Bowmans up, right? And they're like, hey, you know this woman, Kathy, like the bio mom of your missing daughter, Alexis? Yeah, or, you know, Alexis / Andrea. So, you know what, we want to talk to you about her. Let's just, you know, she's causing y'all problems. They set him up, right? That's what I'm getting at. So they bring him in and they do the old, you know, the old 1-2 on him. They're like, you know, here's some water, here's a this or whatever, and they're able to, you know, get his DNA from him. So guess what? Spoiler alert: his DNA matches DNA found on Kathleen's mattress. There you go. So, bam, done, got him, right? Okay, so fast forward a little bit or whatever. The detective goes to, they say the prison, but I don't know if it's prison at this point or if it's jail or whatever. He's incarcerated, right? He goes there to try and get intel from him, right? And he's warming him up and he's basically like, you want Starbucks, you want McDonald's, like whatever. You know, and Dennis is going for it, but he said Dennis has to be in control. This is one of his things. He was like, and I have to let him think that he is in control, because to a degree, in this moment, Dennis is in control, right? He's got information that they want to get. They want a confession out of him. Okay, so eventually, like, we go in that, whatever. Dennis will eventually come clean on this, right? And he will say, I was on the Navy ship. I wanted to get out. I'm drunk. I leave. I stumble upon Kathleen's house. I break in. I'm looking for money. He goes in her room. She wakes up. She screams. There's a struggle. The detective said he's making it, the way he's saying this, is he's like alleviating his responsibility and is like, almost like, well, she made me do it. Well, she screamed. I was just looking for money. She made me do it. This is going to be a theme with him, but oftentimes you see this, right? One thing that comes to my mind, an example of that is in the Chris Watts case. Remember when he went in and we finally saw those interviews, and when the cop was like, the detective, the female, I can't think of her name right now, and she was like, did an accident happen or whatever this? And one of the first stories he comes out with is, oh yeah, I walked in and Shanann did that. He went with the story the detective told him. The alleviating of this. Now, here's the thing. Say you end up 99.9% of us, right, we'll probably not end up ever in a situation of doing this, but you end up doing something like this. It's almost like, I would think psychologically, a layer and unraveling and unpeeling of, I don't want to say I did this. Like in my mind, so this one's specific, Dennis doesn't want to say, yeah, you know what, I wanted a thrill kill. I went out and found her. There's no reason to it. I did ABC to her and then took her life and went on my way. It's easier for him to say, I was drunk. I got off the ship. Well, she left her door open. Well, there was this. Well, I was just looking for money, and then she yelled. You see what I'm saying? The Chris Watts thing. Well, I walked into Shanann doing this, and I had to, because who wants to say I did blank and put my daughters in the oil thing? You know what I'm saying? Like, so it's almost like a level of, okay, well, we'll go to this story they're offering here, and then we'll work there. We've got this much of admittance from it. Where's the next layer of truth? And there's a lot of layers when it comes to truth in Dennis. Okay, now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to kind of read some bullet points that I did with notes and whatnot and just go through those. And so it's going to kind of shift perspectives and whatnot. Now, one thing I did forget to mention is back to that little bit about Dennis and the detective. The detective would say that Dennis was talking about it was this demon in me. It wasn't me. It was this demon that comes out in me. And the cop would say, the detective, whatever, that Dennis's demeanor completely changed when he talked about this side of him. And we often see that in these cases like that where people have this side where they're like habitual. I think there's a difference in a human being who, and I'm not saying any of this makes it right, wrong, or indifferent. I'm just kind of comparing with like what I've witnessed here watching these cases with y'all. You take somebody who does something in the moment, like they snap, whether it's from passion, whether it's from anger, whether it's a mental snap, whatever, versus someone who is habitual. When I say habitual, I'm thinking of people like this guy, BTK, Ted Bundy. Oftentimes people say this thing about them where they're like, there's 100%, it gives me goosebumps. I'm just going to stay in goosebumps state for this video. This other side to them where when that side's out, it doesn't even look like them. Their eyes change. Everything changes, right? So it was interesting to hear the detective talk about this with Dennis. Now, the next note I wrote was the minimizing. He said that, Dennis minimized everything. Now it switches back to the bio mom. And she's saying, you know what? I consider Brenda just as much to blame. Charge her and throw her away too, And when we hear some of the information that comes out, I'm like, yeah, how, what? It's just like, okay. And even Brenda's sister, like with some of this, she's just like, what? Like, hello, Brenda, how did you not, where's denial is running deep with you, okay? One thing with this, and one reason why this speaks so much to me, is the similarities, I said at the beginning of the video, to the Madeline Soto case that we're currently watching unfold, right? More and more footage comes out of interviews with Jen and Stefan and information, right? And there's this level of like, when you hear the stuff that comes out of Jennifer Soto's mouth, you're just like, what? Brenda is the same way in this. And so if you take away, like step back from the personalization of each of these cases and just take away that theme running through, how much is this going on for cases that haven't ended in something like this to where basically like somebody's life is taken or whatever, but to where it's on the map, you see what I'm saying? Of, turning a blind eye to horrible things going on just so that the household isn't disrupted, and this disconnect of, I don't want to see the truth, right? So this was one of the absolutely heartbreaking aspects of this story and the other ones that we follow as well. Okay, so the cops at this point are basically like, we know, okay, our hunch, everybody's hunch, right? Alexis didn't run away. She's not starting a new life somewhere. We need to bring her home. Okay, it really gets to me, this part. So they devise a plan where they are going to go to Dennis and offer him a deal that like he can't refuse, right? Now remember, their life is in Michigan, right? This is where all this is. Well, this case is in Norfolk. The Kathleen case, the one that he said like I got the ship and whatever. So they're basically like, look, here's the situation. We can't make promises, but we can heavily lean toward, if you can help us out here, we can make it to where you can stay in Michigan to be near your daughter and your wife, both of whom are standing by his side. So yeah, this is a huge thing, because you hear Brenda on the phone talking about, I can't afford to come to Norfolk, right? Like I can't do that, okay? So of course Dennis is like, I don't know where she is. And this is the one part right here. Oh my God, you wanted to come to the TV over this, right? He goes into this whole thing of, you don't kill family, okay? You don't kill family. You might get mad at him. You might yell at him, but you don't kill family. And I'm watching it and I'm like, this guy is BS crazy, okay? It's like, because also his tone was almost like condescending, as if the cops didn't know that. Like, what kind of people are you to think that I would kill them? It's okay to kill a stranger. What kind of morals do you have? And this is the logic. And I'm just like watching it like, oh my God, y'all. I cannot, okay? I'm just like, how is this dude saying these things? But you can tell that was the norm in his house. That logic was the norm in that household. There was not like to where we would listen to this and like, huh? Like that, there's so many things wrong with that. That was a norm. And that's what I'm getting to when I say that while yes, I consider Brenda to be an accomplice, to be quite honest, I can tell her, I'm like, oh, Paul, that was the logic she lived under forever. But since she got married to the man, right? She chose to live under, I should say. So, but nonetheless, that was the logic. Okay, so there's that. Now, let's keep going. So they start digging out the Bowman's backyard. Remember I said that the bio mom's like, my baby girl's back there. I looked, that we've been doing the things, or something changing back there, but they don't find anything, okay? But pack that away for a minute. Okay, so then Dennis wants to meet up with Brenda. He does this whole thing where, he's like, Brenda, I need to talk to you. The cops make this happen. Now, I don't have my little paper plate here because this is kind of we might get a little teary-eyed for this. So this is the first thing, my little autograph picture of Ashley Banfield from News Nation. Got to meet her at CrimeCon. So, because this part gets to me right here, y'all. Okay, so I'm already starting, y'all. Okay, so he wants to meet up with Brenda, right? They do this like special thing, okay? Where he's like, I want to meet her, whatever. She comes in and he confesses to what he did to Alexis/Andrea. Okay, I'm going to read my notes here. He says, she's been dead since day one. She was never missing. Okay. And then he gives a new story. He says he came home with the baby. Remember, he dropped Brenda off at work. He comes home with the baby. He says he comes upstairs and Andrea's like, oh, I'm leaving. And they get in this argument. And he says, she says, I'll tell the counselors that you SA'd me again. They get upset, an argument. He pushes her. She falls backwards down the stairs. Essentially, he goes down there and she's dead. Now let's pause there. I said it earlier, but I might not have gone into it deeply. There were accusations brought up by her at one point of stepdad's doing or not stepdad, you know what I'm saying? Adopted dad's doing this type of stuff to me. Well, somebody else in the thing, I can't remember who, was like, well, these situations, they'll put the whole family in the room and be like, well, your daughter's saying that you did this. Is that true? Well, what do you think they're going to say? Oh, sorry, I was just mad at dad that day. You know what I mean? Like, it's so like, what? So, back to this, where he's saying that she's saying, I'm going to tell that you've been doing this. And they get an argument pushing down the stairs. This again, I was like, okay, watching this unfold with Stefan and Madeline, I'm like, I very much wonder if something like this is what took place, where she had enough and she's like, I'm going to tell him, and he did, whatever he ended up obviously doing, okay? So, let me go back to my notes here. Now, the whole time this is going on, he's telling her this, Brenda is crying, and she is saying, don't admit to something you didn't do. Y'all, I mean, this is one of those moments in watching these things where I literally am like this. I'm like, I'm not even related to any of these people. Okay, I'm just watching it, right? And I cannot tell you how bad that made me want to come to the screen and square off with Brenda. Okay. I mean, I was like, huh? Now, there's multiple layers to that. Obviously, I'm being dramatic. Brenda's world is crashing down. She has lived in denial. She has put blinders on. She has chosen to let her husband do these things and not said anything about it, whatever. And now her husband is sitting here. And there is the context of like, they'll let me stay there. So I could see someone like that being like, he's just saying this so that, you know, he can stay in Michigan or whatever. Nobody would want to admit that their husband or wife or whatever their special someone did this to their child. And think of all the things you'd be going through. All those searches, all those restless nights. You knew what? All of those, your world would be melting down. And if you're someone who's lived in denial your whole life, well, you're just going to keep that pattern up. Nonetheless, it doesn't change. It's incredibly infuriating. I can only fathom with the bio mom, Alexis's adopted aunt, I guess you would call her, the people who really loved her felt when they saw pieces of this, okay? So Dennis continues talking to Brenda about this. He's like, I couldn't lose you. I couldn't lose Vanessa. She was only 14 months old. Like, I couldn't get carted off to jail. Now remember, at this point, he's already done these other crimes, right? So he says he wrapped her in a blanket, hid her in the barn, called the cops, said she was missing. Days later, this part, y'all, trigger warning. Days later, he said he had to dismember her, to put her in a barrel, and he set her out with the neighbor's garbage, and the barrel was hauled off, never to be seen before. And then he burned her belongings outside before calling the cops, he said. Y'all, to think of the life that she lived, and for it to end with the person who was supposed to be her father doing that to her, and then at the end of it having such disregard for her body, even that he was willing to dismember her and put her out on the curb like garbage. No human being should ever have to come down here and that be the lesson that their soul, or whatever you want to call it, was here to learn. That is so horrible. I can't even wrap my mind around it, okay? This man is a monster. Okay, so cops don't believe the story. So they're like, you know what? Just like we talked about earlier, there's just different layers of truth with this monster. So they start reading his jail letters. So they have a confession at least, right? So they start reading his jail letters and the info isn't matching up. So basically he's telling Brenda in it that he's like, look, I actually buried her body. I gave her a proper burial next to a graveyard, somewhere so that she would have a proper burial and always be there at least, you know what I'm saying? Keep that in mind when we circle back in a second. The cops, of course, are like, we're trying to bring Alexis/Andrea home. So they devise another plan and they go to Dennis and they're like, look, because you have told her this information, you've basically wrapped her up, meaning Brenda, wrapped her up into the case. So now you've gotten your wife involved, right? And, it is what it is. So Brenda tells him he has to say where the body is so that he can stay in Michigan, and that Brenda wants her remains. Like, they get her on the phone and like, you need to work on your man, right? Okay, so now this part right here, y'all. Ashley, you gotta help me out here, girl. Okay. He finally calls Brenda and he says that he buried their daughter, Alexis, Andrea, in the backyard. The backyard that the bio mom was saying, that's where my girl's at. They bring in a bulldozer this time. Okay, this part's gonna get to me, y'all. And they dig it up, and they come across the barrel. And they finally find Alexis/Andrea. She had been in that backyard the whole time. Now, there was something with the fact that they didn't live there when he buried her. And he's like, yeah, I went and buried her before we got into the house. I mean, that's the level of pre-planning, okay? So he buried her before they moved. He buried her in like he buried her stuff in a trash bag of dirty diapers, probably to hide the smell. Again, this is what this man thought of his daughter. Okay. And I hate saying his daughter, but you know what I mean? Like, that's how he was supposed to view her, okay? There's a candy wrapper on her body with the date 1989 on it. So they know, like, this is what happened. Brenda finally has to confront the truth, okay? So they're on the phone, and she's like going off whatever. He gets mad at her, meaning Dennis gets mad at Brenda. And then Brenda is like, I don't want you mad at me. I still love you. And he's like, I told you that she was next to the graveyard so that you would always know that she had a proper burial, and now you've gone and done this and blah, 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 blah. You see the level of like, you literally, when you're watching this part, your jaw's on the floor, because you're like, the gaslighting that this man is not, like, they just unearthed your adopted daughter out of your backyard, who you dismembered and threw away in a barrel in baby diapers, and lied about it for a lifetime. And you're gaslighting your wife, and she's even saying, I don't want you to be mad, I still love you. That interaction told you everything you needed to know about how they operated and what that household was probably like. Imagine, because at this point, you know, Dennis is old, right? Imagine he's younger, the way he probably ruled that household. I mean, you heard from the friends. You know, Alexis says one little thing wrong, he jumps up, smacks her in front of the friends, chases her down. God only knows what he was. You know he was essaying her. Okay, period. End of story. The people who intervened the first time did it in the wrong way. She had to lie about it, right? She probably threatened him with that, and he probably came after her again. He probably got home that day. This is me just going off on sofa speculation. He probably came home that day from dropping Brenda off, put the baby down, whatever, tried to do whatever he does to her, and she was like, no, I'm going to tell. And there you go. And that was all it took, and he killed her. And then did those things to her body. God bless her. Poor thing. I mean, my God. So let's keep going. Let's wrap this up. We're almost done here. I know this has been kind of a long video. Okay, so cops meet with Brenda and tell her all of his crimes. They go down them. They can't prove, remember that girl, the meta girl who was like, this happened and oh my God, that was him, but they can't prove it, right? So there's that one. Again, Dennis is like, or Brenda is just like total denial, okay? I mean, not denial, but it's like she has to look at it, but basically it's like, I don't know him. The denial is so strong in her. It's like, that's all she knows. And here's the thing too. Well, let me finish and I'll get to that thought. Okay, so the bio mom wants to continue helping solve crimes. You know, this has really lit a fire under her butt, so to speak, which I think is amazing. She is absolutely, I mean, I love this woman, right? Now, Dennis pleads no contest to Andrea's case, second-degree murder. Kathy goes to the sentencing. Bio mom goes to the sentencing. Judge says the case is, you know, one of the worst she's ever seen. He's sentenced to 35 to 50 years. Now, the prosecutor, this is the part that's the best. Remember how they were like, look, if you work with us, we'll keep you in Michigan? The prosecutor says, nope, guess what? You didn't give these people a choice, and Kathleen, this is the case, it's over, so you don't get one either. Bam, back to Norfolk you go. We're not going to put you in Michigan because it's convenient for you to see your family. After all this? Are you crazy? No, so he fell for it. You know, they should have shipped him off to Siberia as far as I'm concerned. Anyways, let's keep going. So then Brenda has the remains of Alexis/Andrea cremated. She offers the bio mom half of them. The bio mom is incredibly insulted by this, but she takes half of them. Now, you hear this phone call between her and Dennis, Brenda and Dennis, and like, I can't remember which one said it, but they're like, well, remember, she's the one that threw her away. You know, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh my God, right? So she's like, I don't know why she would, Brenda's just, you know, kind of incensed that Kathy would be insulted by that or whatever. And I'm just, you know, whatever. So Dennis is serving 2 life sentences, okay? He's incarcerated in the River North Correctional Center, men's prison in Virginia. It's allegedly, it's believed that Brenda still lives in Michigan. I'm not sure what's going on with Vanessa, but it's alleged that she still is very dedicated to her marriage with Dennis, and that's what they do. So those are all the notes that I made on it there. So, a couple of things. again, the denial part. Watching Brenda, her mindset, her denial, all of those things was so infuriating throughout this. And that's what I'm talking about, like when you could do the comparison with the Madeline Soto case, and then going a step further to so many of these cases that we see where someone does that and just kind of puts a blind eye on. Now, someone like Brenda, I then like to sit there and try and put myself in their footsteps to be like, how do we arrive here, right? Now, I don't know any of these people, right? And I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychologist, none of that fancy stuff. So I'm sitting here and I'm like, well, if you're someone like Brenda, you marry this man, and maybe she was like the type that was like, that's my man. He tells me what to do, and that's cool. And that's cool if that's the situation you're in and that's what you want and that works for your relationship. So to then have that uprooted and to be like, this man's a monster, and we're taking that away, would absolutely destroy your reality that you have built your whole life on. Now, also, like with the daughter, the younger sister, Vanessa, nobody wants, I mean, first of all, it's a whole different realm when you talk about kids, right? When you look at the kids of some of these serial killers, people like that, this is a whole different thing. You're going to grow up viewing that person as your parent, you know what I'm saying? So you have this completely different viewpoint, especially if they present themselves in a certain way. Now, I don't know if he ever did anything to Vanessa. I don't know. I don't know, right? But I have a little bit, what I'm getting at is when the kids kind of come up with some like form of like some kind of denial or whatever, depending on the circumstances, I'm like, well, yeah, that's your parent. Like, no one wants to think that, but you then have to process it. Now, I don't know where Vanessa stands now, because where we meet her in here is a level where I didn't see anything after the conviction or anything like that. I mean, she might be now like, no, F that man. Like, I have nothing to do with him, right? I don't know, okay? So I'm speaking of the part that we saw earlier where we met her. Now, onto the dynamic of just the heartbreaking aspect of what Alexis went through. Again, this is somebody who it's like, look at her trajectory. This was what she knew here. It's so sad. The whole, just when you look at the whole thing of it, right? I mean, she left this world with that experience, you know, with this is my worth. This is what I am to these people. You know, this man is doing this stuff to me. My mom, and I know it's the adoptive parents, whatever, but my mom just sits there and lets him. Like, you wouldn't be able to escape that. Of course you would run away. Of course you would want to get in trouble. It's probably all she knew to do to survive, right? And then when it became too much, and there's just seems to be something about that age, again, look at Madeline, she just turned 13, of where it's almost like something takes place. Now, I know different dynamics can happen. You never know. Like, I know there's like, well, what if you get the assailant gets them pregnant and things like this or whatever. But I also think they're coming to their own where they're just like, I'm not gonna, you know, you're not gonna do this to me anymore. And then, I mean, this person's life is on the line, meaning like in this situation, Dennis, he's not gonna want her to go tell, obviously, right? So the logic, I guess, would then be, well, you gotta go. The fact that he was able to, and granted, this is a while ago, right? That he was able to do that and then bury her in the backyard and it just go on for that many decades is shocking to me. You know, it's absolutely shocking. But this is unfortunately how things are. Now, if you look at the flip side of that nowadays with cameras, stuff like that, look at all the evidence in the Madeline Soto case, right? Of him lying and then be able to go back and be like, well, your car was here and this was there and this was on the phone and this was that. They didn't have that stuff going on here. And so that's one of the better things that we have now with technology is that aspect. So that being said, again, if you haven't watched it and you're just listening to me talk about it, I highly recommend going and watching it to bring awareness to her case, to bring awareness to Carl, to the bio mom, to everything, right? And to learn about Alexis, the victim in this. She would have had a lot to offer. She seemed like a really cool girl, right? And it's just heartbreaking, but also a big thing I took away from this was just the similarities of it, of the cases that we watch. And it's like, here is the same story, different players, some different circumstances, but my God, how many people out there, how many kids out there are living in some hellhole that people like Dennis Bowman creates, and they can't get away from it. It's so scary, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. So that's it. If you watched this, let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. I'm dying to hear. Like I said, we'll do a live chat, and then if you're watching this in the replay like way later, then go back to my other channel and look live chats there, I guess. But that's it. I do appreciate it. As you see, the boys, they had to leave halfway through. It became massive playtime, potty time, all those fun things. They're bouncing around. They'll be here for the next one. And of course, thank you once again to Drift for the amazing scents that they send me and for making this video possible. Y'all check them out. Their stuff's in the description box below. And in the meantime, if you could drop some sofas off in the comment section for Rosco and Spirit, myself, and Bo and Luke, who are running around, playing around, so that we can all hang out in the comment section and talk about this case and all the other stuff we do talk about here at the Sofa Squad, and then totally meander our way down there. I'll see y'all soon. I just wanted to say thank you again for watching the whole video, and also thank you for being part of the Sofa Squad. Special thanks to all the Patreon members, channel members from both of my channels, everybody who likes, shares, subscribes, comments in the comment sections. It helps the channel out so much. Now, don't forget, I do have that other channel, the podcast channel. That's where we go live, we hang out, we talk. We have kind of sort of a schedule, but just be sure and check it out. I'll put it up here on the screen. Also, if you're looking for merch, be sure to check out my Teespring store. I'll put that up here. And then, like I said in the beginning of the video, if you want to follow me and Rosco on the Instagram, go on, check it out. It's right here on the screen again. But once again, thank you very much. I really appreciate you being part of the Sofa Squad, and I'll see you in the next video.